in this election, we see the people that voted for Hillary Clinton, they've won by hook or by crook, by any underhanded tactic, they've won. And I think even on CNN, they said the problem is it's a question as to whether they won fair and square. No, it's not a question. It's pretty clear that they didn't win fair and square. The evidence is in. They definitely didn't win fair and square. I've done multiple segments, and I've spoke about it many times when it comes to actually trying to verify and validate the actual election results, and that's all messed up. There's no way. A lot of things that happened in this election remind us of 2004, and then even some cases 2000. Where the elections were clearly stolen, and we just had to live with the results of stolen elections, and nobody ever did anything to make sure that couldn't happen again. It just kind of moved on, and that's hugely odd. But back to what I was saying, we see now that they're like, hey, we've won, shut up and vote for our candidate, or we've won, you need to stop protesting and fall in line and do what we say, or come to some sort of reasoning that we've come with, that this is the best we can do, and this is our candidate. We have to get in line behind this candidate. And all of this is highly condescending. It doesn't make anybody want to support your candidate when without actually redressing any of their grievances or any of their issues that they feel like you haven't addressed. You just tell them that none of that stuff matters, that they're just being a kid, and that you're the adult. And I think that's total BS. Like, you shouldn't be able to make those type of arguments and feel okay with it. And the reason why I say that is, if they have a legitimate grievance, why don't you actually address the actual issue and not just say that they're childish for having an issue that they care about deeply? Has anybody ever had an issue that they would just... I'm not even going to ask that question, because I know everybody who's watching, everybody who watches politics, everybody who follows politics, they have an issue that is dear to their heart, and they won't compromise on that issue. And if we look throughout history, other people have had issues that they would not compromise. And because they would not compromise those issues, we actually were able to have reform occur. And we were actually able to have reform occur on the issue because they wouldn't compromise. They wouldn't say, well, I really believe this, but I'm just going to go ahead and vote even though you're not really covering my issue adequately. They didn't do that. And because they didn't do that, because they held fast to those moral imperatives, that's how we actually got change. So this idea that holding on to a moral imperative or holding on to an issue that you care very deeply about is childish is really, really problematic. It's going to stand in the way of actually having any real reform, because if everybody's just laying down those moral imperatives, we're just subject to whatever people give us rather than dictating the policy agenda. Like, you have to actually stand on something and dictate, say like, okay, this is where I am, and if you're not there, I'm not with you. And the politician's job is to say, okay, he may be lost to me. If too many people are lost to me because of my current stance, I need to move my stance so that I can pick up the requisite amount of people so that I can maintain election or maintain power, right? I'm going to move it away from the politician to just the party or, a group of people, a group of political party in general. I'm just going to leave it at party. So they have to basically figure out where they are in terms of what their current policies are and where the people are. But they don't ever have to reevaluate and change based on the feedback if they get feedback that, hey, I don't really have to move my positions. I can just be a little bit better than the next guy. I can just be a fraction of a hair better than the next guy, or even moderately better than batshit crazy. That's what the Republican Party is right now. It's basically crazy. I can just be, a little bit better than that, or even moderately better than that. But it's so far gone that, in the end, it really doesn't matter for those people that are holding on to those moral imperatives. Like, it doesn't do anything for them if they sacrifice that and just go along with just moderately better than batshit crazy. And so what I'm trying to say is, if you don't stand up for principle and fight for those principles and don't allow yourself to subject your principles to outside influence or outside propaganda or any kind of reason to give up those morals and just accept what already exists, if you don't fall victim to that, you can actually be a part of the coalition that actually pushes and actually gets change accomplished. Like, that's actually how change works. If you're constantly compromising, you're not actually doing anything but accepting what's already there, because there's an amount of inertia. Like the current way that things are, there's an amount of inertia to it. Unless you're willing to countervail that and move in a different direction, you're not going to be able to change the current state. And I think that's a huge problem when people are looking at their politics. They're like, well, I have to vote based off of what somebody else, or I have to vote based off of what's given to me, not what I would like to see. And this is a huge pervasive thing throughout the entire political system. And if you look back, we've been voting like that for decade after decade after decade. And the question I would like to ask is, what's that gotten you? If you're voting like that and you're not really winning anything or changing anything, what are you accomplishing? I mean, I think I know what you're accomplishing. I would say you're not accomplishing anything, but there are those that would say, well, change is slow and blah, 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 blah. You're right. Change is slow, but change is only possible when you hold fast to principle and you fight for those principles, and slowly over time you get them. But you only get them by holding fast and be willing to withdraw support if they don't meet your threshold. If you're not willing to do that, you're not willing to change anything. And so now we're at this place now where people make it pragmatic. It's pragmatic to not have principle. It's pragmatic to basically give up your principle and just fall in line just because the other candidate is really bad. The other candidate will always be bad. That's not changing anytime soon. The other candidate will always be bad. And the only thing that's likely to come out of that is basically the interests that have bought both parties, both the major parties, the interests that have controlled them and dominated the agenda will basically win, because they have both sides covered. If you don't want to support the Democrats, that's fine. They've got the Republicans covered. If you all of a sudden the Republicans do some crazy stuff and it ends up damaging the economy and making us lose face all around the world, and it ends up with these terrible consequences for the lives of everyday people, that's okay, because the Democrats will be swept in. And what will they do? They will do that same agenda that the Republicans did, because their bases are covered with both parties. And I'm not saying every single Democrat is corrupt. I'm not saying every single Republican is corrupt. I would say, most Republicans are just generally wrong based on the ideology that they subscribe to or the way they believe the world works. And then Democrats, by ceding some of the talking points to the Republicans, have occupied a space where Republicans traditionally used to have. So oftentimes on many things having to do with economics, they're oftentimes in the wrong, in my opinion, because again, I'm not here to feed you my truth, right? But they're oftentimes wrong as well. And so the question is, if both sides, on many issues are close enough together on the wrong spectrum that you don't agree with them, well, what do? The answer is you have to be brave and be courageous and say, well, either I'm going to take one party and change it by any means necessary, or I'm going to leave. And that's really the conclusion I've come to personally, is as far as this election is concerned, because pragmatists, they always talk about pragmatism and we have to think about this and we have to think about that. But do you notice they never bring up any type of long-term analysis? And what I mean by this is, what would be the results of a Hillary Clinton presidency?